I'm Neil McLeod. I'm Director of Sales Engineering at Digital Shadows. My talk this afternoon is about demystifying the dark web and mitigating risks on it. Before I go into that, let me just give you a bit of context about Digital Shadows and where we fit. What we do as an organization, digital risk management, we go out there onto the internet and look at places that your data may be exposed. And we're doing this across a number of different systems and platforms. So I could be looking at things like cloud storage. Do you have an insecure Amazon S3 bucket? It could be code repos. I could be looking on GitHub for exposed API keys. I could be looking at criminal forums and dark web markets. Those are the two we're focusing on today. It could be social media, Twitter or LinkedIn or anywhere like that. So we take all these areas and we sort of narrow those down into our sort of five main pillars: dark web monitoring, brand protection, DevSecOps, data leakage detection, and attack surface monitoring. So my agenda this afternoon, I'm going to speak to you about the dark web, some architectures. This is supposed to be just demystifying the dark web conversation. So we're going to spend some time on the dark web, access it, going in and having a look at it in a bit more detail. Defense strategies, law enforcement, and a summary at the end. Let's kick off straight away and say, what is the dark web? The first slide I've got here makes three definitions. We talk about the surface web, the deep web, and the dark web. So let me sort of define each one of those to you. The surface web, which is what we're used to when we climb onto the internet and we surf and we browse and we use our favorite search engine to look for news, that's all considered the surface web. Effectively anything that can be indexed by traditional search engines, and it's available from any browser. If you've been to one of these presentations before, you may have seen an iceberg slide that talks about how small the surface web actually is compared to this massive data that sits on the deep and dark web. Some estimates are that the surface web consists of maybe 5 or 10% of what we can actually see on the internet. And that amazes a lot of people. But what they don't realize is the deep web is just simply stuff on the internet that we don't have access to. It's not indexed by traditional search engines. It's gated sites. But a gated site isn't necessarily evil at all. A gated site could be my bank account. It could be medical records. It could be a private database. It could be anything that I have to have credentials or I have to have some form of gated access to get into. So the deep web itself is enormous, even when compared to the surface web. The dark web is actually a fairly small proportion down at the bottom. The dark web is only accessible through specific software. But if you look at the breakdown there, surface web is the stuff that we can see via a search engine. The deep and the dark web take up maybe 90% of the internet, but the dark web is actually a pretty small proportion of that. So if we have a look at the architecture of things, we're going to be talking about Tor. Tor is the onion router. It was developed mid-90s by the United States Navy. It's a US government project. And what Tor allows us to do is anonymous browsing. And that's anonymous browsing on the surface internet, as well as I can use it to access the dark web. It requires a dedicated browser, and you'll see things called .onion sites. IP2, Invisible Internet Protocol, developed early 2000s. It was designed from the ground up to be a darknet, to be a hidden internet, and it runs in layer 3 and the network layer of the Aussie model. So effectively, you can use standard applications like a standard browser, but you're running over a different networking layer. And the association there is EEP sites, .eep sites. The one reason that EEP or IP2 was developed was Tor, because of its focus on privacy and anonymous browsing, isn't actually the fastest thing. It's pretty slow, and it has been developed to fit into a darknet space, whereas IP2 was developed from the ground up to be darknet focused. Let's have a look at onion routing. How does Tor actually work? So what I would do if I'm browsing using a Tor browser, I have a client sitting down here. And what happens is I want to reach out to a destination. I do this through what Tor calls a circuit, and a circuit is effectively 3 Tor relays, which can be anywhere in the world, which take the data from the Tor client and pass it down to the destination. The Tor client sends off the request. That request goes initially to the entry guard. Now there's a layer of encryption around the packet. So the entry guard knows that that packet came from the Tor client. It knows it has to go to the middle relay, but it doesn't actually know where its destination is. So the entry guard strips off a layer of encryption, gives it to the middle relay. The middle relay takes that. It knows about the entry guard. It knows about the exit relay. But the middle relay doesn't actually know where that packet is going either. It passes it across to the exit relay. The exit relay then strips off the final layer of encryption and passes that on to its destination. So you can see at any point here, any of the relays just know about the previous and the next step. So let's talk about accessing the dark web. How do we actually get onto it? I'm going to focus on Tor here. And disclaimer, this is for educational purposes only. Use at your own risk. The first thing I'm going to say is look for instructions. There's plenty of them out there on the surface web. Otherwise, you can go to www.torproject.org, download the Tor browser from there, and install it on your machine. It's optional. You can install a VPN. That'll give you an additional layer of security. Effectively, you're browsing anonymously, but your ISP will still know that you're accessing Tor. Right, you've got everything downloaded, installed. You want to start the Tor browser. I'm going to do a demo now showing Tor, setting up some circuits and some browsing to Onion sites. It's just setting up a Tor browser. You can see I'm running on a Mac here. I've got my Tor browser up and running. I just have a look at some information on that. So let me just minimize that. What I wanted to show you is from the Tor browser, I can go anywhere on the surface web quite easily. So if I just hit through to BBC, for example, there we go. I'm routed straight through to the BBC. It just looks like a conventional home browser. So now if I want to try looking at the torproject.org, and this is where you actually download the Tor browser from. Let me go to the torproject.org. Now, okay. So I'm onto that website, but what happened was it went to the surface web and then it immediately redirected me. So I'm now actually looking at that .onion site. And because it's a .onion, I know that I'm actually running on the dark web now. Let me try something else just to show you circuits. If I go to google.com from my Tor browser, this will take me straight through to Google on the surface web. And it's asking me to accept some license conditions. And it obviously thinks I'm coming from Germany at the moment. Now, I'm not going to accept that. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go to create a new Tor circuit for this site. So let me click on a new Tor circuit. It's coming up with a license agreement in Dutch now. Let me try one last time. So effectively what's happening is every time I renew the circuit, it's taking me to a different exit relay. And Google thinks I'm based in the country of that exit relay. But the majority of these I see come through in places like Germany and Holland. But if you have a look at the screen that's come up at the moment, I think that's Hungarian. So Google now thinks that I'm actually sitting in Hungary trying to get onto the Google website. Right, so we've had a quick look and we've managed to get to an .onion site on the dark web. Now, let's try and find some content. How do we navigate the dark web? It's pretty tricky. This is probably the hardest thing about the dark web. Think of it as the same as the internet, but without a decent search engine. So you have to know where you want to go to all the time. And there are weird URLs in there. So the biggest challenge you find is finding content, finding out where to go. So resources could be shared via deep web forums, via chat applications. We can search on the surface web, maybe for .onion sites, but very often you need to have some sort of idea of where you're going before you go there. Remember, when you're on the dark web, it doesn't mean that everything is illegal there. There are lots of legitimate sites out there, and we're going to have a look at some of those in a minute. We'll talk, however, quickly about one of the search engines that's out there. It's something called Kilos, probably developed from grams. You can spot the similarity straight away there. But Kilos is a search engine for the dark web that allows you to look through marketplace listings, allows you to look for goods for sale, allows you to, limit things depending on Bitcoin costs, etc. It also contains something called Crumble within it, which is a Bitcoin mixer, which is another way, a layer of anonymization. If I'm buying something on the dark web, I might want to put my Bitcoins through a Bitcoin mixer, which hides the fact that those are actually mine. Right, let's do another demo. Let's go on to the dark web, have a look at a few sites, and end up having a look at the Kilos browser. Right, we've spoken about the dark web a lot, and what I wanted to do quickly is just give you an idea of what sort of content is available out there. So I've fired up my Tor browser again. We're on Tor project on its .onion site at the moment. But let's just go through a few tabs that I've opened earlier. The problem with Tor is because there's a number of circuits you're going through all the time continuously, it's not very fast. Tor was not built for speed. It really was built to keep yourself anonymous, to keep you secure. Speed is definitely a secondary thing. So I've just opened up a few tabs already. But if we have a look, first sort of tab I hit, first onion page I'm looking at here is the CIA. This is completely legitimate content out there. And this is just to emphasize again that not everything on the darknet is bad. There is a large amount of illegal activity out there. Buying and selling things, access to networks, drugs, guns, etc., etc. But there are also a number of legitimate sites out there. These are organizations that may be interested in recruiting foreign intelligence operatives. They want to be on the dark web. They want to make sure the communications with them is secure. Have a look at the next one, Facebook. Facebook's up here. I can log into my Facebook account just the same way I would do on the surface web and access it from here. And you might think to yourself, why on earth would I want to do that? But there could be geographies, there could be certain countries and regimes where Facebook itself is banned. I cannot get onto Facebook at all. So this is an option. I can come onto the .onion site and access my Facebook content, even though at a government level it may be banned. The Guardian. This is just the surface version of the Guardian, but it's talking about its secure drop system. So the Guardian has an area on the dark web called Secure Drop, and what it wants to do is, if you want to share documentation, could be confidential with the Guardian, you can do it directly on the dark web. So go on to the Onion. We can set up a code name if we want. We don't have a username, we have a code name here, but this is the idea of me uploading confidential documentation through to the Guardian newspaper. Kilos search engine, Kilos search engine. We spoke about this, and yeah, let's just look and see what we've got. We're up on Kilos at the moment. Let me put in a search query. Hang on, I'll make it a bit bigger there. But a search query, I may be interested in getting some opioids. I can just put that in as a search term. And here we go. Oh, great, that's handy. It's giving me some other search terms I might be interested in there. Anyway, there's lots of adverts that have come up here for things like Subutex, one pill, 19 euros. Like money. What do they sell? Keep scrolling through. They're basically a carder. So they will send you stolen credit cards with balances on them and allow you to go shopping on them. So if you have a look, there's Visa card with a balance of $2,000 on it. They'll give me for 75. UK passports, well, they're obviously not real. They are counterfeit passports. I can look and go onto the Euro Guns website. There's not much out there at the moment. The UK Cannabis website, or I could choose to go onto one of the marketplaces where I can access a number of different forums, more like an eBay type environment. So this just gives you an idea of the sort of content that is available on the darknet via these .onion domains. Okay, so we've now done some surfing on the dark web. Let's talk about some of the digital risks on both the deep and the dark web, because a lot of criminal forums are on the deep web. In other words, they are on the surface internet. They're just protected by a username and a password or some sort of gated community. They're not necessarily all the way on a .onion site on the dark web. So we speak about forums and marketplaces, but we probably also have to cover applications, browser applications like Telegram, like Jabber. What we're seeing is a lot of transactions take place via one-to-one messaging. An initial contact is made on a forum or a marketplace, but then the negotiation and the actual transaction takes place away from that marketplace or that forum on sort of a one-to-one basis. And this is typically to hide from authorities and companies that are looking at the dark web. High-profile marketplaces come and go. We'll talk about this shortly, but we see marketplaces appear. We see them disappear on a regular basis. The sort of risks we need to be aware of are, as my organization being mentioned, are any threat actors speaking about me directly or indirectly? And when I say that, talking about me directly would be mentioning my company name. Talking about me indirectly might be saying we're targeting a computer security company based in Canary Wharf with a turnover of X amount of money, just to give people a flavor of the company that they're transacting over. The sort of risks we're looking at are accounts for sale, phishing kits, data dumps that are out there, or potential ransomware attacks that people are looking to launch against my organization. Let's have a quick look again, another demo. We'll go on and have a look at some educational access that we saw for sale and the transaction that took place on the dark web. We've had a look at part of the deep web, part of the dark web, how you surf around, what sort of stuff is for sale out there. But there's too much to keep track of, and this is where I want to speak about the automation that we can bring to the table. So I wanted to start by showing you an article around in info security. This article spoke about hacked educational RDP details were found for sale. The price that the threat actor was looking for was about 25 bitcoins, with a buy it now price of 75 bitcoins, about $1 million. So this was a pretty big deal. One of my colleagues, Casey, was following this and noted that the price had been dropped on this, so obviously hadn't been for sale. Now, I could go and try and find this. If I was an educational establishment, I was worried about my details being up for sale, I might want to go onto the deep web or the dark web and try and find out more information. What was actually for sale? Is my organization affected? To get some more details, though, I could also just have a look at digital shadows, and what I'm going to show you is something called shadow search here. I'm going to start off looking at a Tipper article. So this is the original article that was written by the Photon research team. It talks about advertising more than 500 educational related networks, victims based in the States. Here's the actual URL of where that came from. We've got a couple of different profiles. This is closed source, which means we had to log into the system. We have a persona on that particular forum. Now, if I read through this article in a bit more detail, it gives me more information about the user. And just by highlighting it, I can say, right, let me search across for that. So I'm going to click on search. It's going to take me across to shadow search. And what I'm now doing is virtually doing a freeform search across all the deep and dark web forums that we are monitoring on a continuous basis for any mention of that username. We've got the tipper article itself is out at the top. If I go down, there's another few articles referring to this threat actor. I'm just going to click on the latest one here. And let me see what this covers. Educational establishments access. It was for sale, starting bid of 25 bitcoins. It was going up by 1.5 bitcoins per bid, and its blitz price, or its buy it now price, was 75 bitcoins. And if we keep looking, that was the original advert. Then he bumps it, and then he drops it all the way down to 10 bitcoin start. And then there's actually another bit of text in here where he says something else. What does he say here? Closed, not relevant. Okay, so on the 8th of November, the network access has either been withdrawn from sale or it has actually been sold. Right, so what can we do about this? How do we defend ourselves? I think the first thing I would highlight is don't ignore the deep and dark web. There's a lot of really good content out there, and we can look at it, we can browse it, we can research it, really to provide ourselves proactive threat mitigation. We can use it to fortify our defenses for maximum data protection. I think the most important thing is we need to know our digital assets, and we need to be searching for those and searching for any exposure on a continuous basis. And this is across forums, criminal forums, and dark web marketplaces. And we can also set up generic searches based on industry, geography, etc. If I have a list of assets and I'm not getting a hit on those, but I do a search for something like a telco in the Middle East, it may well be that I get hits back with people selling that, but they haven't mentioned the company name. And the final defense strategy, I'd say, is bring in a partner who does this for you, who does it continuously and with a high level of relevancy, a high level of context, and a low level of false positives. Right, we're going to do another demo now. The final demo I'd like to show you is we're going to go back to the Digital Shadows portal. And we do two things within this portal. The first thing is we look proactively for data around your organization that may have been leaked out onto the internet. And we do this by configuring lists of assets for an organization. So setting up things like URLs, IP addresses, company names, Twitter handles, etc. But we can also do free-form searches across data that we've picked up previously by using something called shadow search. So I could go through and here I'm just going to select a previous search criteria I've put together. This really looks at, this search string here really looks at forum posts for people selling access to things. There's just a few key phrases that we use here. And at the end, we've got something to do with pricing on that access, revenue, price, bitcoins, blitz. So we're looking for people selling access on various forums. And if I do a search across the data that we're holding, this is the sort of stuff that comes up. So the first one up here from a user called JXB1990, he's selling full access, RDP. Let's go in and have a little look there at the thread. And we've got the entire thread stored here. So somebody's saying, I'm new to the forum, I have 2 full accesses for sale. One is to a UK school, revenue of 5 million, which is quite interesting. Why is he mentioning that? Why is he mentioning the 5 million? And the very simple reason for that is it gives the buyer an idea of the size of the organization. if I'm going to monetize this, if I'm going to maybe launch a ransomware attack against this school, I know what their revenue is, so I've got an idea how to price my ransomware attack. He's also got access to an Australian recruitment company. So he posted that at, just before 8 o'clock in the morning. About lunchtime, somebody comes back and says, if you've still got it, I'm interested. There was a reply on direct message. Shortly after that, we've got somebody who's saying, they reach out to one of the forum moderators and saying, hi, we need your help here, probably to run as escrow, to sort of act as a guarantor for this transaction. And, 8 hours later, 8 hours after initial advert, it's closed. It's that access to the school has been closed. So if we just look again, have a look at that and see what else we've got. Remote access desktop selling. Here's a Brazilian company. Somebody is selling Citrix access to it. Automotive, financial, and real estate sectors. So quite an interesting organization. 100 largest business groups in Brazil. Here's the sort of access I've got. Revenue of $300 million. The network's running so fast as it's antivirus, and the price is $2,000. So these are the sort of things that we see for sale on a regular basis. But we can have searches through here on anything. If I have a look through some of my saved searches in the past, it was somebody selling access to a European telco here. The post came up, it was just access through to a European telco. I can't remember why we were looking for this one in detail, but interestingly, we have a username there, which we can pivot around on and see what else he's been doing, what else he's been selling. So if we just pivot around on that username, here's a tipper from our research team that highlighted they were selling it was university web shell access. Here's actually a social media profile, a Twitter profile for that username. And that's quite unique. Access at Stanford University, and this was the one about the European telcos. So he's been fairly active at the moment. If I just had to put in, let me see, type equals, and it gives us an idea of what we're covering there. Threat actors, alerts, campaigns, dark webs, data breaches, marketplace listings, etc. So we're able to proactively go out and search these based on your company assets, or using shadow search here, I'm able to do free-form searches across all the data that we hold already. I wanted to finish just by discussing law enforcement and some of the many challenges that they face when it comes to tackling the dark web and tackling forums and criminal activities on it. Have a look at this screen. And this was one of the famous marketplaces from a year and a bit ago, seized in May 2019. This was Wall Street. One of the many marketplaces that has come and gone over the years. There definitely seems to be a pattern in the dark web. A marketplace will come in, it will be an incredibly popular site, and it will disappear, either as the result of law enforcement or a result in some cases of the administrators of the site just basically doing a runner and keeping all the money that they're holding in escrow for their customers. But there is a pattern. Marketplaces seem to be very temporal things. Just a couple of months ago, September 2020, Operation Disruptor resulted in 179 arrests. Now, these are pretty high-profile operations involving law enforcement from multiple different countries, having done a lot of work. But their focus internationally is dark web marketplaces. What we see a lot of is buyers and sellers are now going onto marketplaces, advertising goods for sale, making that initial contact there, but then immediately switching to a different communications channel, typically messaging apps like Wickr, Jabber, or Telegram. How to handle, what to do if you're a threat, if there is a risk on the dark web is a tricky one. Digital Shadows, as part of one of our services, we are able to offer managed takedowns of content on the surface web. If you find somebody impersonating your domain or your brand, we can get that removed from the internet. But this is virtually impossible on the dark web. Similarly, if you start talking about the deep web, a lot of the deep web forums are run on what's called bulletproof infrastructure. These are typically server farms in countries with very lax data laws, where they really don't care what runs as long as they get paid for it, and they'll ignore any takedown requests at all. So if your organization is targeted, I can suggest working with local law enforcement in the first place. In the UK, that's Reach Out to Action Fraud. If you're not a member of it, have a look at contributing to CISP, which is a program run by the NCSC. That's the Cyber Security Information Sharing Partnership, run under the auspices of the NCSC. And finally, I would ask everyone to share threat intelligence in your community, in your industry vertical, either informally, via CISP, or through any sort of ISAC or information sharing analysis center that your community may have, like the FS-ISAC for financial services. Right, just in summary, been through the presentation, we've defined the surface, deep and dark webs, and I hope I've explained the differences between them to you. We've demonstrated Tor accessing the dark web and going on to a number of onion sites out there. As I pointed out, there are a lot of overlaps between criminal forums on the deep web and marketplaces on the dark web. So don't ignore one at the expense of the other. You should be researching both of these areas. And we spoke about how criminals are moving towards direct messaging applications. But there's still a lot of good content in those forums and marketplaces. And what I would say is don't ignore those to pick up things like the initial listings or some subsequent chatter around them. Monitor the deep and dark webs, both of them, as part of a digital risk program. And I would highly recommend partnering with an organization like ourselves to automate these searches and to eliminate false positives. Just finally, here's the areas we look at again: dark web monitoring, brand protection, DevSecOps, attack surface monitoring, and data leakage detection. Finally, additional resources. Come onto your search engines and have a search for Digital Shadows blog. We've got our Photon research team, which produces incredible research, and there's a specific area for cybercrime and dark web research. Subscribe to Shadow Talk. It's our weekly podcast. Follow us at Digital Shadows on Twitter. And that's it from my side. Thank you very much for listening this afternoon. Appreciate your time. Thank you. Goodbye.